I've been in practice since 1978, and a lot of these patients were with me, and they became friends, if you will. Anyway, let me just start off. There was an elderly man, a widower, and he talked to me, but not his family, about what his wishes were. And he wrote up papers, went to a lawyer, and even had it taped on the front of his refrigerator with copies in my chart. And he lived in Century Village. He went to Publix and collapsed on a catwalk. His neighbors called the paramedics. He was resuscitated and taken to the hospital. And here he is laying there. His family comes down, and he had no idea what his wishes were. And one wants everything done, the other one let him go, and suffering, and it was just so horrible to watch. And in the end, he finally did pass away, and he got his wishes, but with a lot of pain, suffering, and whatever. There was an elderly widow who I took care of for years. She lost her husband the year before, and she was very active, volunteering, doing all kinds of wonderful things for people and groups. And she wanted to be very independent, didn't want to burden her children, so she made all these different provisions to do similarly to the other gentleman who had his DNR taped on the refrigerator, but she didn't go quite that far. And anyway, she fell, hit her head, and rapidly deteriorated. And she was in the hospital, and all kinds of tests. Her children flew down, and there were 3 kids. And one let her go, one, we have to do everything, and the other one would go back and forth, and every morning he'd come in and it would be a different thing. And it just was so sad to watch this woman. And ultimately she was in a vegetative state, and she passed away. And it went on for weeks. I had another very crazy situation where I had a young man who had a dilated cardiomyopathy. He was 55 years old, which is young to me. And he did everything possible. And this is several years ago, where we didn't have some of the new drugs that help people to stay alive longer, and kind of as a bridge to transplant some of the new technology. But be that as it may, he kept deteriorating, and finally, the last, I guess, well, must have been the last several weeks of his life, he was in and out of the hospital. He'd go to the hospital, we'd tune him up, give him IVs, he'd go to a nursing home, only to come back in an ambulance. This was going back and forth and back and forth. Each time we would resuscitate him, he'd be less and less viable, less and less able to do anything. That was quite grotesque. There was a new head nurse of the CCU at the hospital that came on, and she had a philosophy that the families should watch what happens. And of course I was chief of the CCU, and I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me, that's horrible. And then these children, the adult children, they were like 25 to 30, and his wife had passed away. And they were trying to make decisions, and they didn't understand, despite a minister coming in explaining how dreadfully ill he was and that he wanted to die and whatever. This kept going on. I mean, at one point there were 3 times that we resuscitated him, and we'd go out in the waiting room and say, please, please, just listen to what we're saying. He's not getting better. He arrested, the kids were sitting right in there, and I was making rounds in the CCU. I ran into the room, and I was trying to usher them out, and then the head nurse said, no, let them stay. So they were at the foot of the bed where we're doing all these grotesque things, pumping on the chest. The tubes were there, but IVs and needles that looked like the size of fishing rods, and all kinds of horrible things to someone that's not familiar with what's happening. They're not fishing rods that big, but to make the point. And the 2 of them looked at each other, and they said to me, this is what resuscitation is? And I said, yes, it is. And trying to be very compassionate. And the young woman grabbed my hand and said, can we make it stop? Can you stop? And I said, stop. This is what you want, we stop. And it was really very heart-wrenching. I mean, I was crying about it. because I am softy. But these are the kind of things that people don't realize when they say, I want everything done, or families want everything done. And they don't realize it. And it's very, very sad. I mean, resources, it breaks up families. And I can tell you that when my father passed away, my younger sister wouldn't talk to me because, unfortunately, she couldn't get down to Florida fast enough. My older sister happened to be there. And the two of us put our heads together because we knew what Dad said, and he had so many issues. We said, okay, let's let it go and give the arrests. And my younger sister didn't talk to me for years, or my older sister, to tear a family apart for something like this. And it's just so sad. I'm going to tell you one other little story. I had let me just find it here. He had another man who had end-stage cancer, recurrence, and very elegant old professor. And he spoke to his family, and it's interesting because, well, he was a professor, none of his kids went to college. I thought that was kind of, they all went into some sort of trade type thing, which I found interesting. But anyway, he sat down with them, explained what he wanted, wrote them letters, very elegant letters. I had copies of them, I still have them in my office. And said, I want to die in peace. I want to be with Mom. And when the time came, the kids came down, and they sat there and held his hands. And he peacefully went on to the next world.